stereo,
okay.
like listening, to high fidelity.
So you got a hi-fi setup.
Yeah.
That's expensive. How much did that run you?
A little more than 100,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you listen to stuff in like vinyl?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I should have had you come up and take a peek. It's pretty impressive.
Is that upstairs or?
Yeah, it's in my study. That's my listening room and study. So I have a chair and the stereo. It's not the best sized room, but it's yeah. I mean, the speakers are like 75, 80.
Oh yeah. What's
So
the company that makes them?
So IJCAHPO is the name of the company that speakers. Then I've got a Constellation amps, dual mono amps, and a Macintosh preamp, and an acoustic solid turntable. That's this work of art thing. It's pretty cool. But the cartridge for the table was 10,000.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's nuts. I started when in college. I got to college and I contacted my roommate. I had two roommates, but one was blind. And he had, I'm into stereo, of course, because he's blind. And so I said, I got this great stereo. We'll combine our stereo systems, if in our room, it'll be great. So he got there like a day before I did, and I walked in the room, and there's this monster stereo set with reel-to-reel tape and turntable, and I'm like, I have like a Radio Shack,
right.
Pair of speakers and a little amplifier, and the whole thing cost like $180. And his stuff was, this was in 1978, and his stuff was, a couple $1,000s. And I just looked at all of it, and he said, "Okay, did you bring your stereo?" I said, "Nope." Decided not to. But anyway, I got into it back then with him, and then I had the same in college. I got some pretty nice speakers, nice stuff, and then I sort of kept that for probably 10, 15 years, and then finally, after med school, I had more money, so I sort of upgraded back about 15 years ago, and then in the last few years, I've really upgraded a lot.
I've heard the hi-fi quality is such that like once you delve into it, it's hard to go back to.
Well, it is. And the other problem is, it's probably, I can't imagine doing too much more upgrading because my hearing is not going to get any better, and so it's like do it now, and get the best thing you can get, and now, any little tweak would cost,
right,
amazing amount of money. So. The only thing I don't have that I haven't really gotten into at all are like the music server or digital stuff. So I've got a CD or a transport, and I've got the turntable, but I don't have like a Roon or one of these. I don't know that much about it. But my preamp is supposedly great it has a great DAC in it, and so I'm set to do it. I just need to learn more about it. And there's this high-end stereo store in Montgomery, Hanson Audio. Mm-hmm. It's right next to Eddie Merlot's there.
Yeah.
And so I went there and listened to stuff, and I actually had the guy from there come and set up, make sure my turntable cartridge and everything was set up right. So I'll probably go over there someday and just, try to learn more about it and think about doing that. But I don't know. I think it's a great way to hear lots of new music cheap without buying expensive albums or CDs.
Do you have the whole room proofed?
Yeah, soundproof. Not soundproof, but sound treated. So that was one of the first things I did. So if you see me, you might have seen it because on the Zoom meetings, if I'm home,
that's the room you're in.
That's the room. It's got all this this black and white stuff on the ceilings. And so what room are you in? So yeah, that's my listening room.
I just assumed you were downstairs somewhere.
Yeah, no, that's upstairs above, sort of next to it above the garage.
I forgot you had a blind roommate. Did he feel like because of that impairment that he felt like his other senses were heightened and he was really able to appreciate that hi-fi quality?
I don't really know because that's all he knows. You know what I mean? I think he had very good ears and he could definitely hear things I couldn't hear. But he became blind. He wasn't born blind. He became blind when he was about 13. So
have you kept in touch with him at all?
Well, yeah. Until about 10 years ago, he passed away. So he was born with bilateral retinoblastoma. And so back in 1960, the treatment was enucleate the eye with the bigger tumor load and radiate the other eye, which they did. And he did great. No problems, good vision, son of an anesthesiologist on the East Coast. And then he was like 11. He began to gradually lose his vision in his only eye, and no one could find anything wrong. And this was 1971. And so he went, his father's a physician. He went everywhere. He saw the president of the American Academy of Ophthalmology, a well-known institution, who said, see a psychiatrist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you're faking. He had a pneumoencephalogram, which is the old test where they basically get rid of your spinal fluid and inject air to highlight the outline of the central nervous system. Very painful. Couldn't find anything. So the next year, 1972, is when CAT scans came out, and they found his optic nerve sheath meningioma, which they had no treatment for, and he just went blind. And so that was when he was like 12, 13. And then I met him when we were 18, and when we were juniors, the summer between sophomore and junior year, the tumor was growing, and so they enucleated the other eye. And so he had bilateral prostheses, and that's one of the reasons I became interested in ophthalmology. I wasn't set on ophthalmology, but it was interesting to me. And ironically, of course, he had a nerve sheath meningioma, and I became a neuro-ophthalmologist.
Right.
So there was that was just sort of coincidence, I think. So.
Huh. Well, one thing I wanted to talk to you about is what you've been up to the past. We've been in lockdown, 4, 5, 6 weeks now at this point?
Right.
You told me on Friday that you wanted to get in 3 hours of training every day this weekend.
Yeah, well, the weekend, yeah, but I'm doing a couple hours of training on the weekdays and a few hours. So I do a lot of cycling, and back 1999 to 2005, did a lot of cycling and racing and so on, and had an internet coach for a while just to sort of make sure I was doing things right. And
how do you get plugged in with an internet coach?
I had just heard, because that was back when Lance Armstrong was like at his prime. So he won the Tour de France from 99 to 2005. I won the Ohio State Championship from 99 to 2005. And so back then, his coach, Chris Carmichael, had like an online coaching service. And I said, well, I'm going to do that.
Sure.
And so I went online and found it. And I didn't have Chris Carmichael as my coach, but he had a whole bunch of people who were coaches, and you sort of filled out information, and they sort of said, well, you'd probably be good with this person or that person. You're not a serious cyclist, meaning like a professional person, who's going to spend 6 or 7 hours a day riding their bike. And so you don't want one of those guys because they'll expect too much. And so I had a coach for about a year and a half until I thought, I could probably do this now. I've learned enough. And then, so I raced for a while, and then just was more of a hobby. And then I decided sometime around the beginning of the year, right before my 60th birthday, that it would be a good year in cycling, every 5 years or every 10, depending, you're in a new age group. So it's age group racing. And so, of course, at 60, you're at the beginning of your age group, theoretically, as good as you're going to get. So I figured this year would be a good year to try to set a new record at our local Cleves time trial race, which has been going on for about 50 years. And so I got an internet coach again, and sent him all my travel schedule, and he said, geez, this is going to be tough. He said, I'm not sure whether to feel sorry for you or to be jealous. And then, a month later, this was in mid-February when I signed him up, and a month later, I emailed him and said, all my trips are canceled because of the COVID thing. And he said, good, now you can train seriously. And so I said, okay, yeah, you can. I'm not seeing patients like I was. I have a lot more free time during the week. And so he bumped up my training. And so now I'm probably in better shape than I've been, and looking forward to the races. If they have the race, it usually runs from May to September every Tuesday night. And it's certainly been postponed probably until Ohio allows gatherings of 50 people or more, which I'm hoping will be before the end of the season, so I can put the training to a race. Although I will be, in 2 weeks, I'm going to go race of the course like it's a real race, just as a practice kind of a thing.
So May to September every Tuesday night, you said?
Every Tuesday night.
And then what is it, like the cumulative total?
No, it's just, people just go, and they have it, when it's a good day for them, a good Tuesday. That way, if it's raining and crappy, it doesn't matter because it's just one of the Tuesdays out of the series. But it's every Tuesday night. It's been this way for like 50-something years. They think it's the longest running, like, continuous kind of race like this in the country. And they even did like a documentary film thing on it, low budget amateur kind of thing a couple of years ago. So they have records for everybody forever, so I figured that would be a good goal, keep me busy, and so far so good. We'll see.
I was reviewing what DeWine put out over the weekend, and I'm hopeful that some of the stuff within the next 2 or 3 weeks will
right, unless there's this big peak, and then he says go backwards.
Right. Well, I was hearing that I think he would be much more open to it if the number of COVID cases was on a steady decline for 14 days, and I'm not quite. We're pretty lucky, thankfully, here.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're quite at a 14-day decline.
No, and I don't know what will happen. Of course, I mean, the whole question is going to take at least a couple of weeks to know what happens with the, relaxing the social or the businesses and all that stuff, and then a couple of more weeks. And so we may not really even know until the end of May, what the real effect is of relaxing everything.
So let's say this whole thing opens up in June. You go in on a Tuesday night, you set the record in your age group.
That's it.
But then let's say someone comes in July or August and beats your record. Can you come back and do it again? Okay.
Sure, yeah. Or next year, or, so you can race as many times as you want, once in the whole summer, or you could every night. There are guys that do it every Tuesday night. And some of them, I think they must be using kind of for training, and some of them they're serious,
So post-September every year, is that like your off season, or do you still?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, so you have it's all very regimented. You sort of have, you're done with your racing. So it's September, October, you kind of take it easy. You're still riding, but you're not pushing it. And then sort of October, November, December, you're lifting a lot more, doing a lot more weights, still doing some riding. And then around January, you start putting in sort of these long workouts, lots of miles, endurance type training. And then depending on your races, what you do is they say, okay, what are your pick, no more than 3 A races for your season. These are your big races. So it could be, like the state championships. It could be setting a record at this. It could be the national championships. Those are your 3 big things. When are they? Okay, hopefully there's some time in between them. And then your whole schedule is geared towards peaking at those 3 big races. Now you may have other B races or C races, but you won't peak. So it's very much it's called periodization. It's very much a, kind of build up a base and then train for the event you're doing, and then put in, as you get closer to the race, you actually put less training in so you're fresher and ready to go, but still have that edge. And then hopefully that day of the race is when you're at your peak, and then you race. And then hopefully your next race is a month away or so you can then start not over, but start again with the sort of periodization and peaking for the next race.
So the internet coach helps with this, reviews your schedule.
Oh yeah, he sent me my May schedule a little late because I did a test yesterday so that he could create the right schedule. But every day it's, Monday this, Tuesday this, and it's different. It's not the same every week. It's an individualized thing. So he looks at you send him your workout data for the week, because of course these days my bike computer records everything: speed, how fast I'm pedaling, the cadence, what my average watts of power are, which is what they really base a lot on, and of course heart rate. And then he'll say, okay, for instance, my ride on Friday was interval ride. So you go warm up for 30 minutes, keep your heart rate below 130. Then do a couple short, like 1 minute intensity things to get your heart rate up a bit. Rest 5 minutes, spin easily. Then 3 12-minute intervals, keeping your heart rate no higher than 153, which is all based on testing you do to figure out, what the right heart rate is. Keep your cadence, how fast you're spinning the pedals at least 90, and by those 2 parameters, heart rate and pedals, try to make as many watts as you can. And then what you see as you get better and better is your average watts go up, keeping the other 2 things constant, heart rate and cadence. And then hopefully as you're improving, your average power goes up, which is what is happening.
So what are the physiologic parameters you track? Do you wear like a wrist monitor, a heart monitor?
I have a chest strap that connects to my cyclo computer, and so that records average heart rate, peak heart rate, current heart rate, and then there's that, and the power output those are the 2 main physiologic things. So how many watts can you generate for time trialing, it's really on an average basis. So if you're like in a bike racer and sprinting, so how many watts can you do for 20 seconds? For time trialing, it's what can you average for 30 minutes or 40 minutes or 50 minutes? Because the longest time trials are going to be about 24 miles, and the shortest about 10 miles.
How deep into it are you? Do you track like heart rate variability at all?
Not. I do. I mean, if like for instance, what the descriptions of some of these things are, if you can't get your heart rate to this level within 10 minutes, you're overworked. Mm-hmm. Don't do this workout. Take it easy. Or if you can't keep your power at a certain level, at a certain heart rate, you're training too hard. Bag this workout and just take it easy. Ride for an hour and don't push it. So that sort of a thing. I don't check the heart rate stuff, during the course of the day. Like resting heart rate. I don't usually pay too much attention to that.
What sort of weightlifting do you do for cycling? I'm assuming it's a lot of posterior chain work, lower body.
Yeah, it is. When I got this coach, I said, well, what about lifting? And he said, I said, I do, my whole body's type stuff. And he said, well, of course you don't really need to do your upper body. And I said, yeah, but I don't want to look like a cyclist. He said, when I look like, if someone says I look like a cyclist, that means I'm not doing enough upper body lifting. So he said, well, I'll tell you what you do for your lower body, but your upper body, do, high repetitions, and you should be, when you're done with the set, you should be able to do another 10 reps, that same set. So in other words, take it easy. It shouldn't be a major focus. Keep in shape, keep toned, but you might want to lose a little upper body weight and concentrate on lower body. And so lower body, I do probably 2, 4, 7 exercises. And I usually, typically, maybe before I had the coach, I would do, 8, 10, maybe 12 repetitions per set, and then rest, and then do another 8 or 10 or 12 in that range. He's got me now doing sets of 50 of each of them. Wow. And 3. So I used to do 2 sets.
Endurance.
Yes.
Low weight, high rep.
Right. So we didn't start there. We started with 15 for a week, twice a week. So it's lifting twice a week. 15. Then the next week it was 20s. Then it was 25s, then 30s, then 40s, then 50s. And I said, I hope it's 50s. So when I got my schedule today, I said, I hope it's not going to be more than 50s. And the good news is I only have one more week of 50s, and then he said we're going down to 20s, and don't increase your weights. Just leave them at 20. Whatever you're doing at 50, do them at 20, which will be really easy. But we're going to be doing more cycling. So your workouts will be shorter, which gives you more time for cycling, because you're going to get ready for that practice time trial. And so we don't want you need at least a couple of weeks of no lifting before a race.
So what are the movement patterns he's having you do? Are you doing like lunges, squats?
I'm doing step-ups where you just hold dumbbells and then step up onto other things. So you're, step-ups, hyperextensions for the lower back. I do leg presses and like reverse leg pulls where I've got like the thing wrapped around my ankle and a cable, and I stand up and throw my leg backwards with the weight. So it's like for the butt and the hamstrings.
Glute extensions.
Yeah, glute extensions. And then leg extensions and fitball leg curls, where you just lie on the floor and put your ankles on top of one of those fit balls, and you pull it in towards your butt and then out like that. And then calf raises for calves.
Is this everything you do, the weight training, the cycling? Is this all solo? Do you train with other people?
No, it's fun to, it's the problem is it is all solo, because in cycling, unless you're riding with someone who's, within 1 or 2% of what you can do, you can't do the kind of workouts, and there's just no way. And when you're cycling, if you're cycling even with one person and you draft with them, you need to put out so much less power if you're behind them than if you're in front of them, because most of your energy, once you get to 25 miles an hour, most of it's overcoming wind resistance. And so unfortunately, I like riding with people, but this kind of training, you just really can't. Some of the rides you could maybe, but not really. You'd have to be so evenly matched. And of course, your schedule would have to be the same as whoever else's schedule. And I don't have that luxury. I've got to do it when I can do it.
Right.
usually.
This is fascinating for me to hear because I cycled when I was really, really young, but I've never like seriously done it. And when I moved back to Cincinnati after intern year, a good buddy of mine who's been into cycling and skating his whole life said, you should come with us. And so every Sunday on the Loveland Bike Trail, I would use one of his bikes, not fit to my body at all. He's much shorter than me. So like by the end of it, I felt terrible.
Right.
But it was just a lot of fun. So I'm an amateur, below the level of an enthusiast. When you're pedaling, what part of the foot are you pushing down with? Are you engaging plantar flexion? Are you digging with the heel, or is it kind of a uniform?
I think the hardest part about the pedaling is that, of course, if you're really into it, you have cycling shoes with a cleat.
Right.
And the cleat is placed more or less under the ball of your foot. And so your toes are here, the cleat is here. So the only part of your foot that's connected to the pedal is right sort of the ball of your foot. And so that's where all the pressure's coming. And the hardest part, it's not so much that you're using your calves a lot, but it's getting pedaling in a 360-degree effort. So your tendency is push down, and then you come around, push down. So that's called pedaling in squares. So my wife and I used to have a tandem, and she would always pedal in squares. It would drive me nuts. Whereas you want it to be as even a 360-degree effort as you can make it. So you have to sort of concentrate when you start to actually like you're scuffing mud off your shoe. Like, so you put your shoe like on a welcome mat, and you got mud on it, and you push your foot back. You got to concentrate on that part of the motion. So ideally, you want to have a nice 360-degree effort where there's obviously the push down, but then the pull through and the push down. And in fact, on my indoor trainer, there's a circular graph of that. So it actually tracks your pressure. So if your circle looks like this, it shouldn't. It should look like this. So you can watch and try to make it look as circular as possible.
So you wear the cleats, and you probably wear the special shorts.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I wear the cycling, the usual cycling stuff. And then what I do, time trialing, is unlike like most of what you'll see on the Tour de France, or this big group of people, riding in a pack. That's not, time trialing is the racing where it's one person against the clock. So it would be perfect for COVID because you start, and then depending on how long the course is and how many people, 30 seconds or a minute later, the next rider goes, and then the next rider. So you're not allowed to draft in this race. You can't. You'd be disqualified if you're drafting. So you've just got to basically ride as hard as you can. And so again, because of the aerodynamics, I mean, you have the helmet, the teardrop, sort of, although they're getting away from the teardrop, but it's all about aerodynamics and having the right. I mean, I have a racing one-piece time trial suit that's made of material that's slippery in the wind.
You wear goggles and everything.
Oh, well, I've got a helmet that has a visor so that it's, and it doesn't have holes in it because that would be not aerodynamic. So, if you're racing, my races are always an hour or less. If you're an hour, I mean, your head gets hot, but it's a good trade-off for the aerodynamic thing. In fact, my first state championship in 1999, I decided I'm going to go do the state championship. And so I went, and I'd been riding a little bit, but not really racing. But some of the guys I was riding with, because I used to ride with, they said, "Oh, you should go try that state championship time trial." I said, "I don't know." And they did, just try it. So I went, and back then you couldn't get these aerodynamic helmets in the U.S. because they had to be a certain safety approval, but there wasn't a demand, and so they weren't available. And so I said, "Well, crap! I've got this helmet with all these vents." So I duct taped them. So I showed up at this race with a helmet with duct tape, on it. And I won by 6 seconds. And there's no question. The duct tape made the difference because it was like a 45-minute ride. And if you look at the calculations for an aerodynamic helmet versus not, it'd be like a minute on a 45-minute race. So no question the duct tape made a difference.
You have a carbon fiber bike?
Yeah.
What's the best? What's like the bike to get?
There's so many really good bikes. I just, for my 60th birthday, also got a new time trial bike. So it's called Parley. It's made in Massachusetts. So it's a custom made kind of a thing. But there's so many good, brands of bikes and so on. And they're all pretty aerodynamic, the bikes, which is why you personally, you're the biggest determinant. You're the biggest thing on the bike. And so that's why you got to make yourself as aerodynamic as possible.
So during this COVID time period, how much do you think your training's ramped up with this extra time you have?
Oh, probably at least 50%. Yeah, probably 50% more. So unfortunately, sort of, it's, starting this week, we're going back to more or less, for me, it'll be more or less normal, maybe not quite normal, but it'll be approaching normal. So I, in fact, told my coach that, gee, for May, you may have to back off on the weekday training. And he did. And so he sent me these workouts. And I said, geez, now, did you back off on this particular? Because he had no riding. I used to just warm up 10 minutes on my bike and then do my lifting. So I just rode 10 minutes to warm up. And now he's got me doing 75 to 90-minute rides before the lifting. So before all those sets of 50, I ride for an hour and a half. So I said, listen, on a Wednesday, I can't, that's 3 hours. I can't do that when I'm working. I mean, I could, but I won't. So I can't have a 3-hour workout. So he changed it to just the lifting and with no riding. So I emailed him and said, now, are you doing that just because of, I told you I didn't have time, or is that really the plan because we were doing other things, getting ready for the race? He said, no, I did it because you said you didn't have time. And I said, all right, so if I do have time, when I go to 20s, then I could ramp up do the riding. He said, yeah, whatever amount of time you have, once you figure out how long it takes you to do those sets of 20, ride the rest of the time. If that's 15 minutes on one day, fine. If it's an hour and 15 minutes on one day, fine.
Well, I think you're probably in the top 1% of people when it comes to exercise and physical fitness. I mean, since I've known you, I've always known that, staying in shape, being active was an important part of your life. But I've even had other attendings tell me, Carl really takes his fitness seriously. Is that something for most of your life that's always been a part, or did you realize along the way that exercise is the elixir?
No, it has. It really, since I've been 13 or 14, a friend of mine said, we're going out for the track team. I said, I can't, I'm not a runner. He said, no, we're going to be weight men. We're going to throw the discus and shot put. And I said, well, okay. And he said, well, then we're going to have to lift to do that. And I said, oh, okay. So we started lifting back then. So in high school, my sport was the discus, and that's when I really started doing a lot of lifting. And I weighed about 20 pounds more in high school and college than I do now because that was a different sport.
Right.
I mean, it was 2 seconds spin in the discus ring, and it was all powerlifting and that sort of stuff. So I started then, and I think definitely the longest time I've gone without lifting was a couple of years ago. I had a cycling accident and broke my collarbone and scapula and had to have surgery, and I couldn't lift for a couple months. But since 13, that's by far the longest time I've gone without lifting. Although I still got on my bike on my indoor bike with a broken collarbone.
Yeah, what was recovery for that like? I remember when that happened. I didn't get a chance to talk to you in depth about it.
It was. I mean, it took. It was, the problem was the scapula was broken in 3 places, and that's why I needed surgery. At first they said, and then I went to India, and then they emailed me and said, yeah, you need surgery. And I said, I'm in India. And they said, what? You went to India? And I said, you said it was all right. And they said, well, come back. We need to do the surgery within 2 weeks. And so the recovery time, I forget exactly how long he said not to do anything. I mean, it was really painful at first, so I didn't do anything, of course, for the first few weeks after the surgery, and then just kind of gradually got on the indoor bike and just, kept my shoulder immobilized, and then gradually started doing a little bit more, and then started lifting. And the surgeon said, well, you'll probably be back in a year to pretty much your regular weights and all that stuff, but don't push it too much. And that's, it was probably less than a year that it took to get back to regular. I was doing everything, but it was obviously, I'm right-handed and it was my right arm. So I'm pretty much back. He said, well, you'll be back to your new normal, which is, it feels like there's metal in my shoulder, which there is, titanium. It just feels a little funny. And one of the nerves to one of the small muscles was cut. And he said, well, your right arm probably just won't be your strongest arm anymore because we couldn't fix that. So do these exercises to build up the muscles and you'll be okay.
What was that like psychologically? I mean, being so active and then being forced to really, really go to zero or slow it down.
It was depressing, I guess. I mean, it was one of those things where I think looking back on all the potential problems I could have had over the years, I was like, okay, it's like par for the course of having at least one of these things. I've had a couple of accidents on the bike. This one was by far the worst. And I had one a few years ago where I had to lay off for a couple of weeks. But I don't know. It wasn't terrible. Partly it wasn't terrible because it hurt so much. And I knew that it wasn't like I want to work out because it was painful just to, move my shoulder a little bit. So it wasn't probably as bad as I thought it was going to be.
How did it happen?
I was just riding down this hill and a car was coming. So I decided to move over a little bit and my tire and wheel got caught in a little defect in the pavement. And it was just like I didn't know what happened. Honestly, all of a sudden, all I knew, I was on the ground and I was my cyclocomputer said 28 when I fell off. But the wheel got in this depression and I tried to just gently move, and it was too big a depression. And so it just threw me, thankfully, to the right, onto the ground, not the pavement. And I didn't know what happened. So my first ride, I went back and to look and say, well, how did this happen? I mean, it's very hard for, someone with all that momentum. I mean, you can imagine going 28 miles an hour, with me and my bike weighing 200 pounds to fall off. I mean, you hit a rock or something, no big deal. But I couldn't imagine how that happened until I actually went back and took pictures of the road. So they haven't fixed it yet either.
I had a similar accident when I was a kid.
Oh.
I've had two biking accidents, both around the age of like 5 to 7.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Pittsburgh, and so us kids in the neighborhood, we'd cycle around the cul-de-sacs, and there was sidewalks, huge sidewalks. We'd race on the sidewalks. But I was biking, and my front tire lined up perfectly with the width of one of the sewer grates.
Oh yeah,
and it got caught, and my bike did a complete 180.
Right.
And so I fell. I was facing the pavement, fell. And then there was another one where we were racing, and young Arjun was very focused on overtaking his competitor and not aware of his surroundings. Went to overtake the guy and hit a mailbox.
Oh gosh!
And went flying into the road.
Well, the sewer grates these days, the newer ones don't have that. They have more of a crisscross, or they're going the other direction.
Right.
I think partly for that reason. But yeah, you got to watch out for those things.
Huh. This COVID period in terms of exercise reminds me a lot of what it was like studying for step 1, at least before it was pass fail.
Oh.
Because in my opinion, there was like two types of people. Everyone studied hard for step 1, theoretically, put in the same amount of time during dedicated period when you didn't have to take classes or take quizzes or tests. You made your own schedule. But I think people handled that period differently. Some people exercised every day, got a lot of sleep, got their nutrition in check, and others kind of did the opposite. And so it was like when you showed up to test day, there were some people who were in the absolute best shape of their life, and there were some people who looked like they'd been through a war. And I think that we're going to be going through a similar thing as we emerge from this COVID pandemic, because I know so many people who've said, the gym's closed, stopped exercising.
Right.
And I tell them, you don't need a bike, you don't need a gym, you don't need weights to exercise. You can do push-ups, you can do sit-ups, body weight squats, lunges. You can go out and run. If you have a bike, you can bike. Burpees are free. You just need to have that desire to make yourself work. And I just don't think a lot of people have that.
Yeah.
So,
well, luckily, I talk about all the lifting. Of course, we have a gym in our house, which is why I still can do all that training. So that was it. That was sort of we have a gym in the house just because it takes time to go to the gym. So many, many years ago, we got equipment and stuff and then gradually increased it over the years. But it was really nice to have the gym. All the commercial gyms are closed, which we don't use anyway. So it was nice to have the gym at home to be able to use it.
When you cycle or when you bike and you're in it for 30, 40 minutes, do you ever feel like you hit a Zen state, like a flow state?
I do on occasion. I mean, sometimes one of the things I like about cycling is just that it's amazing sort of how fast you can go under your own power, And if you have a little tailwind, and there's not, wind hitting you in the face, because of course, if there's no wind, then you're creating wind by going 25 miles an hour. But the other day I was doing a 3-hour ride, and there wasn't a lot of wind, it didn't seem. But when I did a turnaround to sort of come back, I was on this long straightaway, and I was just cruising along and, watching my numbers and not watching my speed at all. And I realized I'm doing like 32 miles an hour for like long period of time. And you just get in this rhythm, and it's great. So sometimes you do. And but I really like that feeling, of being able to go fast, under your own power. And if you have a tailwind, all the better.
Yeah. I feel like people who stick with a physical activity for years, who are dedicated and committed to physical fitness and exercise, they sometimes hit that flow state, they call it, or like moving Zen, or this meditative state. And to me, there's no other perfect example apart from the health benefits of exercise as to why exercise is so important. Like, exercise fundamentally changes who you are as a person physically. The endorphins, the chemicals, the neurotransmitters that are being released, the change in the ratio of fat to muscle to bone in your body, that all influences our neurophysiology, our personalities, our mood, the way we interact with other people, the way we respond to challenges, just the way that we interface with the world. Sure. So I've always kind of viewed exercise as like the elixir to life.
Yeah, and I think on a bike, if you're even if you're riding with a group, but when you're riding and doing the kind of training I'm doing, you got a lot of time, because I'm not listening to music or anything. I don't I don't have headphones or earphones to listen. I think about it, but I'd be too worried about traffic and all that. But it's like meditation, right? So it is very cathartic, no question.
I love that you brought up that you don't listen to music, because for the most part, I don't listen to music either, unless like I'm post-call, I'm really tired, I need something to just give me a little extra energy boost. Do you know who David Goggins is?
I think I'm familiar with the name, but I don't know.
So he's a former Navy SEAL who's now he runs like ultra marathons, ultra triathlons. Okay. He formerly set the world record for most amount of pull-ups. He did 4,000
Is he the guy that did the plank record too? There was some other.
He might have been.
Like 8 hours. It was like 8 hours of planking.
Fathom that. But he did like 4,000 pull-ups in 17 hours, and that was like that wasn't his first attempt. He had done previous attempts, and I think the pull-up bar he brought in wasn't stabilized. He'd been training on a pull-up bar that didn't move, but the pull-up bar he brought in had a little bit of give to it. So after doing who knows how many thousands, he tore his extensor pollicis. Can you imagine how many pull-ups you have to do to tear an extensor? But so he said this very controversial point of view, which I actually kind of agree with to some extent, is he says, you shouldn't listen to music when you exercise. He said, listening to music is cheating. And of course, if you watch the video clips or Instagram posts of him on the internet, he gets destroyed in the comments section. People are like, well, if music helps me go to the gym and I enjoy it, and it forces me to exercise and lose calories and improve my health, like, why is that bad? And I almost feel like he was talking more to not just the average person. He was talking to like a high level athlete, someone who really exercises a lot. Because I've been doing martial arts since I was 7. Yeah. And I've always kind of had the same philosophy, like why would if I get into an altercation on the street or I get into a fight, theme music or battle music isn't going to start playing in the background, right? Right. So to some extent, you need that intrinsic motivation to push yourself to be uncomfortable to the limit. And I think that's what he was talking about.
Maybe, yeah, because I think for most recreational people, anything that gets them doing it's obviously good.
Right.
So
when I worked with you as a medical student, even as a resident, we'd schedule the clinic, so we would see the patients, and then around noon we'd have lunch. We'd go over the morning patients, and then at the end of the day we'd go over the patients. And I noticed you would always bring in for lunch a sandwich, like a bag of chips or an apple, and a drink. Yeah. What is you're so dialed in? Yeah. So dialed in for this fitness. What is your nutrition like?
Well, I think my wife would say boring. I guess I can eat more or less the same thing without caring too much about it. So nutrition is, I don't eat a lot of junk food, but I don't like count calories and all that kind of thing either. So I try to just eat healthy foods more or less. I like ice cream and like peanut butter. And so those are kind of the things that I'll eat that I consider, well, the peanut butter is pretty healthy because it's the natural stuff. And I usually have salads at night. on weekdays, and then we have fish one weekend night, and usually some sort of beef or pork or something the other, and turkey sandwiches at lunch, and so I've just started taking some protein supplements because of the increased. The nice thing, of course, about burning all those calories is you get to eat pretty much whatever you want.
Right.
And since I've been with this coach, I go out, I go do a 3-hour ride, and that's like, it counts calories too. Mm-hmm. It's like 2,500 calories. So you can eat a lot. So I've been eating more, and I realized I'm probably not getting enough protein. So I just started with some protein supplementation in addition after workouts.
So you have a pretty good idea of how many calories you're burning. Do you track intake at all, or macros?
Not really. I weigh myself, and if it starts to go a little up, but my weight hasn't changed in decades. In the winter, I'm about 5 pounds heavier than I am in the summer, but it's the same pretty much so far. At least it's been pretty much the same. Gain about 5 pounds in the winter, a lot less volume of cycling just because it's so boring to ride inside. And then outside in the summer, burn off the calories and lose a little bit.
So you just make healthy choices in general.
I think, yeah. I don't weigh my food or, say, oh, that's that. I'm not eating it because it's bad for me. I'm not that big into that.
I haven't really gotten into weighing food yet, but a few years ago I started to track, not just from a numeric standpoint of the calories in, but I found that the act of tracking, in these apps made me much more aware of what was in food. And so I think over time that just led me to make healthier food choices, just because I'm far more aware of what's in.
Don't get me wrong. I've read books on nutrition for cyclists and all. I just reread it as I found out my shelf during the COVID thing. It had a chance to read more books, so I just reread that book too about I forget it's not called Nutrition for Cyclists, but that might as well be the title, but it talked all about that. And that's in part actually why I started doing the protein supplement, because I read that book again.
How often do you train on the level and bike trail? Or if at all? Yeah,
so I usually use the level and bike trail to get from like point A to point B if there's a lot of traffic. And then, so that would be like a warm up side, because I was there on Saturday afternoon, this past Saturday, and it was like 80 degrees. I have never ever in 25 years seen so many people on the level and bike trail, and you can't. There's no way you can train on it because you're stopping and starting, and little kids are veering their bikes in and around things. So I live fairly close to getting on the bike trail. It takes me like 10 minutes to get on the bike trail, so I might do 20-minute more warm up on the bike trail. It'll get me out to like Round Bottom Road, or it'll get me out to Loveland and then out into the countryside. And so I'll use it like that.
So when I was young, my parents would take us biking on that Loveland bike trail. And then, as I grew up, I stopped going out there. Well, when I came back from intern year and my buddy got me biking out there again, it made me realize, to me, that the Loveland bike trail is probably the most beautiful part of our city. It's like our greatest treasure, in my opinion. I feel like every time I'm on it, I'm in a corridor to a different dimension, and every branch, every offshoot is like going into a different world.
Well, and it goes and goes and goes.
I heard it connects to like 70, 100 miles.
Yeah,
total
it goes up towards Columbus, and I did recently do an early morning. Well, not early, a morning Sunday ride. It was kind of overcast and drizzly, and 55, and there was nobody on it, and so I rode for 3 hours, and I just rode an hour and a half north and out through Morrow and the Caesars Creek Park. It goes through there. I just went 90 minutes north and then back. And there was I could have gone another 90 minutes, I think.
You ever done a century?
Oh yeah. Not recently, because it's not at all the kind of training I need to do for time trialing, which is a short, kind of a thing. But I've done a bunch of them in the past, big group ride kind of things, that sort of thing.
On the Loveland bike trail, I think I would love to do the entire expanse, not for time or anything, but just for the pleasure of it. Yeah. So you've been exercising a lot, but what's apart from not being able to travel as much as you have, what's it been like being grounded? Are you enjoying it? Or are you itching to get back out there into the world?
I'm enjoying it. So my hobbies.
Loaded question, right?
None of my hobbies have been affected. So I cycling and exercising is obviously a big hobby, and then serious listening to music is a hobby. So, I got all that at home too. So I don't have, that's a very singular, usually sort of a thing for me. And so that's been good. I've had a chance to do some more reading, finish up some projects at home. So the hard part's going to be going back to a regular schedule, I think. So I don't mean to make light of the whole situation, but I don't mind being quarantined or semi-quarantined really at all. I mean, my wife's getting a little nuts. She likes to go out and shop. She likes to go out to dinner. She's beginning to feel, definitely kind of cooped up. But she doesn't really cycle much, but she does a lot of walking, and she'll go out and do long walks and all that kind of thing. But so I'm more relaxed than ever. It's been really nice. We have been seeing patients some, but only sort of urgent, whatever your definition might be of that, urgent patients. So, my typical week would be 6 half days of patients and 4 half days of administrative work as chairman of the department. And so now I'm just doing, until this coming week, I was only doing like 2 half days of patient care. So there are 4 half days of patient care, not in the office, at home, whatever. And the administrative stuff is almost all done at home, but the meetings are all there. They're just all online meetings now.
So many online meetings.
Yeah. So that's nice though, because honestly, these meetings that I used to have in like 5 to 6:30, which would be in my exercising time, I'm in the gym at home with the meeting, and nobody knows. So don't tell anyone that. And so it's really nice because I can listen to what I need to hear for a lot of it's informational stuff, and I'm in the gym, and I'm thinking that it might be a good idea to continue that when the COVID thing is over. Just call into the meeting because that can get in my way. So yeah, I think I'm ready to go back. And this coming week, we're going to be starting with, I think I have a 1 half day of no patients instead of 4. So.
Well, I'll tell you, people are fascinated by you, not just residents, medical students, but even your colleagues at the Eye Institute, because you wear so many hats. You're chairman of our Department of Ophthalmology, and arguably one of the most well-respected areas of ophthalmology in the world here in Cincinnati. You have your own private clinic at the Eye Institute. You work with us residents in our neuro subspecialty clinic here at Oxworth. And then at the same time, you get invited, and you're traveling every month almost of the year to how many countries have you been to now?
Well, I've spoken in 70, invited lectures, 70 countries. So, and I don't know, those are the ones I keep track of. I don't know how many other countries I've been to, probably another 10 or 15, something like that. So,
how do you do it? How do you juggle all those responsibilities?
I think being organized, and it wasn't like, one day someone said, okay, you're going to do all these things. It's been something that's occurred over a long period of time, I think. I don't think, probably couldn't do it if it was all of a sudden put in your lap, but it's something you just add a little bit here and add a little bit there. And I think being really organized, I think having a routine, my grandparents always said, have a routine, do everything in moderation, but, do whatever you can do. And so I think that's it. I think the chairmanship is something, this is kind of a unique chairmanship here in Cincinnati because of the relationship with the Cincinnati Eye Institute. And it's unique in the sense that it's less administrative work than a typical chairmanship job, I think, because a lot of our faculty are adjunct, affiliate, volunteer. I don't control their salaries. And when I became chairman, one of my friends who's a chair said, you'll only be as happy as your unhappiest faculty member. And the good news is there aren't that many full-time faculty members to be unhappy because I don't control their money. And so I think that allows me to do a lot of the traveling, and certainly, normally in a given year, I will be traveling internationally twice a month, every month. So it's about the last few years, 300,000 miles a year. Oh my gosh. So, and the trips aren't long. They can be very short. I can be in Pakistan for, 36 hours, depending on where I'm going. I spend more or less time. So I've been there before, then it's going to be less time. If it's something new, then maybe I'll spend an extra day to sightsee and so on. But Yeah, I don't know. I think it's organization, really.
What trips were cut short so far because of the COVID?
Oh, let's see. If we go back to, so my last trip was the North American Ophthalmology Society meeting, which barely took place, but did take place. And that was in early March. And so then I then had meet after that. So since then, no travel, national or international traveling. So I've missed meetings since then. Oh, let's see if I can go back and reconstruct. So missed meetings in San Diego, Tunisia, Lebanon, Romania, China, missing meetings this month that are canceled in California, somewhere else, Indonesia, Jamaica was supposed to be early July. My next scheduled meeting is India mid-July that has not yet been canceled. And then I got China that's going to definitely take place in early August.
You going to do it?
Oh yeah, that'll be my next meeting. As long as, I can book a flight right now. I've looked to see. So China's my next scheduled meeting, but I've had meetings after that meeting canceled as well. So the International Association for Prevent Blindness meeting was going to be in Singapore in September. They canceled. Some other meeting. Malaysia was canceled in September. So we'll see what happens. The problem is what's going to happen is most of these meetings that are quote unquote canceled, they're not really canceled. They're postponed, but they're going to all try to put them together like they are doing with sports perhaps, or I know like the big cycling races. They're trying to push them all together like the Tour de France. So the travel is going to be like that, I think, in the fall. It's going to be nuts, and there's not going to be enough time to put all those meetings in, and they'll have to get bumped into 2021, some of them.
I love this. I'm very jealous. When I was a kid, it was always a goal of mine. I said, before I die, I want to experience every single country on Earth.
Yeah.
You just listed off more countries than probably most people experience in their entire lifetime.
Yeah.
What do you think is your favorite one you've been to so far?
People ask me that, it's probably better than asking my least favorite, because I definitely have an answer for that. But my favorite, probably, I like so many, and there's so, one of the nice things about the traveling is also that usually you're invited and you're like, the guest of honor kind of a thing. And so you get treated really nice, which, I always hope that they're not going to want to come visit me, because I could never treat them as well as they treat me. But Vietnam, I think, is probably, I've been there, I don't know, half a dozen times. The people are really friendly. I love the Vietnamese food. Any culture that drinks shots of vodka at lunchtime during a meeting can't be bad. So I like Vietnam quite a bit. But there are a lot of other places I like too. So that doesn't mean I don't like the other places I've been. But I think maybe that's one of my favorites, I think.
Speaking of Vietnam, I've heard that's an amazing place to go on a motorcycle to tour the countryside.
That I have not done. That's how I used to only have a motorcycle. That was my transportation in college and med school. But I haven't done any riding of any motorcycles for a long time. Although my wife just recently said, we should get a motorcycle. We could drive, I'll ride on the back. And I said, really? Let's get a Harley. So that might be happening. We'll see in another month or so. But yeah, I've heard that too. But I don't know. I think it probably would be, of course, in the cities, which is mostly where I've been in Vietnam. There's thousands of the little motorcycle, the small little motorcycles and scooters. That's all just hundreds of them at every intersection. It's kind of crazy.
Most med students and residents are amazed when they find out you used to have a motorcycle.
Oh.
How did that all happen?
Oh, geez.
I don't know too many people today, or any colleagues of mine or friends who are into motorcycles.
I totaled 3 motorcycles back in the day. My brother, who's a year younger than I am, he got a motorcycle. And so I rode his a little bit. Thought, I'm gonna get it. So I got a 2-cylinder Yamaha motorcycle, and I used to keep it. I was a fraternity president at college, and I used to keep it in the girls' restroom for a while until they found out that I was doing that. So it's like a fire hazard amongst all sorts of other things. But that was back in the late 70s. So I had a motorcycle then, and then I had a small motorcycle. I wanted a bigger motorcycle. So then got a bigger motorcycle, and I had about, I think 4 or so. And then I rode them all through. I didn't have a car at all, no car. So I rode them all through med school, and I in the winter in Baltimore, I'd ride past the temperature sign, 10 degrees. And I thought, I wonder what the wind chill is at 60 miles an hour at 10 degrees. And so I had these big, of course, coats and things, and my throttle cable would freeze open. So I'd come off the highway, and I'd just downshift, and the bike would rev up, and I'd reach around and grab the cable to break up the ice so that I could stop. And then I ended up, when I was an intern, I said, all right, I have to have a car. I can't rely on a motorcycle. So I got a car and sold the motorcycles. And then when I was done with training, I said, now I'm an attending. I can afford a motorcycle and a car. And I got a, fancy motorcycle. And I rode it so infrequently because I was in South Carolina, and every day it's like 70% chance of an afternoon thunder shower. And I have to bring all this rain crap and stuff. And so I kept the motorcycle for like a year and put 1,000 miles on it and said, this is ridiculous. I'm paying insurance. And so I sold it, and I haven't had a motorcycle since. So I think about it sometimes, but I don't know. I just haven't done it yet till maybe sometime soon. That's what shocked me. My wife said to,
You said you put in about 300,000 miles.
Flying. Or a year.
What are the perks that comes with that? I'm sure you're first class everywhere, top of the
Well,
line.
you're not first class everywhere. You definitely, you're treated nicely. And I have the maximum status on United system and Delta system both. So obviously you get into all the lounges and all that, and you get upgraded before other people. But internationally, it's not that easy. But it does depend a bit on the system. So my advice would be do United, not Delta, if you want to get upgraded a lot. It's way easier to get upgraded on United than Delta. At least in the past, it has been. So, that's it. But I fly coach a lot still. I do. Because none of the places that I go pay business, almost none. A couple would pay business, but almost none pay. Will pay for business, because it's outrageous. I don't know who pays for business, but
it's really expensive.
Oh, yeah. I flew round trip to Singapore, paid business, and it was like $9,000 versus like $1,100 for coach. I have a patient in Saudi Arabia, Prince, who pays business, so for house calls.
So you're a United guy.
Well, I have more total miles on Delta than United because Cincinnati used to be a big Delta hub, but then when it wasn't, when Delta and Northwestern merged, Cincinnati lost and no longer a hub. So we lost a lot of our direct flights to places. The good news is the airport's never very busy. But then somewhere along that, I realized, the only reason I'm a big Delta flyer is because I could get all these direct flights.
Right.
And now you can't. So I thought, well, maybe I should investigate United or American. And I did. And I thought, well, United would be better. But who wants to go through the pain of having no status, right? Because I'm spoiled with Delta. And I called United, and they said, oh, we have a status matching program. And I said, oh, tell me about that. And they said, well, basically you just show us documentation of your status. So if you're a diamond medallion on Delta, just print out the thing that says you're a diamond medallion and send it to us. And you will immediately be our corresponding level, which is 1K. And from the day you sign up, you will, for your first flight, you'll be a 1K. But in the first 3 months, you have to fly 35,000 miles. And as long as you fly the 35,000, you're 1K the rest of the year. And then you'll just be in the regular pool and have to meet the criteria to maintain your 1K thing. So my very first flight, I said, well, I got to time this right because I had to fly 35,000 miles. I said, well, I've got a round trip business class to Singapore. How many miles? 34,000. And I said, okay, sign me up now. So my first flight on United was business because it was paid for business. But since then I've kept the 1K and the diamond thing with Delta. So, but yeah, I at some point I won't be flying as much. I'm gonna have to pick, and it's probably gonna be United when I pick, because it's just easier to upgrade on United. I get upgraded internationally. I get upgraded nationally all the time, but most of the flying I do is international. So I don't care if I get upgraded on a 3 or 4 hour flight. It's the 15 and 16 hour flights
Right.
you want to get upgraded on.
That's a pro tip with the status matching.
Yeah, I know.
didn't know that existed.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It worked very, very well for me. So
I was signed up to go to a Bausch and Lomb surgical course last year. I was a first year, and it was in St. Louis. And I had such a negative experience with United.
Oh, really?
I ended up stranded in the airport for 18 hours.
Oh.
They didn't get my luggage there in time. I show up to the course in like shorts and short sleeve, haven't showered in like 36 hours.
Oh, jeez.
So from then, I said, I'm just going to do Delta.
Okay.
And I flew enough on Delta last year that I hit silver medallion, hit status for the first time in my life. The perks of just being a silver medallion status holder, it completely changed the travel experience for me. And through that and credit cards, I have access to the lounge, Centurion lounges and the Delta lounges and Priority Pass. Completely revolutionizes traveling, just the small perks.
Well, as a diamond, one of the things I can do is make someone gold. So my wife, you're gold, says she automatically gets gold status because you can every year you get the pick 3 of these 7 things that you want, and one of them is to make somebody a gold member. So I always do that.
I found just traveling this year alone in the beginning of the year, I got upgraded a lot to Comfort Plus or first class, like at least in my experience.
As a silver medallion?
As a silver medallion.
Really?
I think even when we went on the mission trip to El Salvador, I think even then I was first class on the main leg from Atlanta to San Salvador.
Wow.
Which was interesting.
Wow.
But you travel this much, surely everything's not all positive. What are like the worst travel stories you have?
Oh, geez.
I'm sure you've had some pretty interesting experiences.
Well, I think overall, I really shouldn't complain because most of the travel goes pretty well, but probably the worst travel, I think probably the worst travel experience by far was, I work a lot with Orbis as a volunteer, but also they told me I work with them too much, so they want to pay me. So I'm a consultant too.
Consultant for Orbis.
Yeah.
Huh.
So
what is Orbis for those people listening who don't know?
Yeah.
What
So
it is?
Orbis is an NGO, non-governmental organization based in the U.S. who has the Flying Eye Hospital, which has the one OR and the recovery room, and then lasers and a lecture hall all on the plane. So the plane goes to various places around the world and sort of parks at the airport for usually 3 weeks. And the typical thing they do is we'll have volunteer faculty, 4 per week, come in. So you come in for a week. You'll do some lectures on the plane, do some cases on the plane, but they always partner because the plane's not big enough to really just see a lot of patients. They partner with the hospital in that city, and then there's a whole hospital program. So the hospital program is like 5 times bigger than the plane program, but the plane is, it's kind of sexy and it's a cool thing. So
what are you lecturing to on the plane? Is this like recording presentations or?
No, the front part of the plane, right behind the pilots, is they just have the regular plane seats, but they have electronics and stuff so that you can give lectures. And so people from the hospital, the doctors will come and to the plane for that morning to listen to lectures, for instance. So we did a program in Dhaka, Bangladesh, 2 years ago, I think it was, and no problem on the way there, but on the way back, there were a bunch of us on the same flight, and we were all going from Dhaka to Dubai, and then to make our connections. And so we're at the airport, no big deal, and we get on the plane, and I'm like starting to doze off, after 5 minutes, and the plane pushes back, and then all of a sudden it's like, we're not going anywhere. And so then the plane goes back to the gate. Oh, crap. And the pilot says, well, one of our 2 engines won't start. No, that's a problem. So he said, okay, so everyone wait, just we'll keep you updated. So, okay, we need a new part. We have to put a new part. Okay, but it's in Dubai. It'll get here tomorrow. So everybody off the plane. So we all got off the plane and went back. And we all, of course, obviously had checked out of the hotel, and then with a really nice hotel, which wasn't available. So they got like one of these buses that I can't describe it unless you've been to Bangladesh. So they got us on one of these buses, and it's like an hour and a half back to Dhaka. And we got a decent hotel. And went back to I said, okay, come back, tomorrow because we're going to leave tomorrow. It's just the part has to come back from Dubai. So okay, we'll get to the airport. We got to the airport like 9 a.m. And then we're like, wait a minute, the plane from Dubai doesn't even get here till like 10:30, 11, and they got to put the part in the plane, right? So sure enough, we're all waiting there. We're all through security. We're waiting, and it's not a huge airport, and you could see there's big glass windows, and you could see there's our plane, right? And here comes the plane from Dubai, and then an hour later, okay, they've got the engine cover open, and we're all just watching. All the people on the plane are watching them working on the plane. And finally, they close the plane cover, the engine cover. They say, "Okay, everyone," and we just walked out down the stairs onto the tarmac, onto the plane. It's like, aren't they going to test it or anything? And so anyway, we're just happy all to be on this plane. But now, the plane it's delayed some because they had to put the part in, and there are people. Thankfully, my connecting flight was like 5 hours in Dubai, but some people were connecting to Australia or whatever. So we're sitting there and waiting. They close the boarding door. And I'm in the front of the plane, thankfully, next to the boarding door, watching them. And they close the boarding door, and I'm starting to doze off again. And then I wake up at like 5 or 10, and like the stairs are still there. The stair, because this is like a mobile stair thing that a truck, right? So I look out and at the thing, and there's oil like pouring out of the hydraulics for the stairs. So they couldn't move the stairs away from the plane. And if they can't move the stairs away, you can't back the plane up. So now everyone is like, I'm going to miss my connecting flight in Dubai. And it's just, so what do? They find a forklift. And they bring this forklift over and put it under the stairs, lift up the stairs, and pull the stairs away. And then we left. That was the worst, because that was more than 24 hours delay and just a lot of stress. And this was after the whole week, and we're all like, everybody wants to be home. We're, Bangladesh is fine, but we're ready to be back home. And that was the worst, I think.
Hmm. And that was all with Orbis.
Thankfully, it was, because the nice part about it was, if it would just have been me, which most of the times it's just me, I would have been back in the airport with I wouldn't know how, they organized the whole bus back and the hotel. So it was very nice that it wasn't just me on the plane, because it would have been a whole different story. It would have been way worse if it wasn't. And we had a nice dinner with the Orbis people and found beer, and so it wasn't that bad. It could have been a lot worse.
What is Cybersight specifically within Orbis? Because you've done a lot of recorded lectures that are available for free.
Yes.
Like really good hour-long lectures on neuro-ophthalmology through
yes,
Cybersight.
So their Cybersight is just the name of their website. So Cybersight, it's a website that has, a lot of the recorded lectures, although I did a whole series that are just recorded, are webinars that are recorded. So recently, I've been doing at least a few Orbis webinars a year, and they record them and put them in the library. There's also just some lectures that are recorded. They've got all the videos and everything for, that you'd want for neuro-ophthalmology. But the other part of the Cybersite, there's a number of parts of the website, but the other part that's cool that I also do is, so you're in, let's see, what was my most recent consult? I had a consult, I think my most recent one was from Mongolia. And someone posts a case, neuro-ophthalmology case, and they send me, you've got a case. And so I get a notification from the Cybersight website that says, you've got a case. And then I open the case up, and there's a history, the date, hopefully the data that I need, visual fields, fundus photographs. I look at the case. Sometimes I say, I need to know this and this and this, or no, here's the answer. I don't say this is easy, but there's enough data for me to tell you what the answer is. And sometimes we'll go back and forth, 3 or 4 times, but they'll put eye movement videos and things. So, but they do that for all specialties in ophthalmology. You can post a case from anywhere in the world to the website for no charge. And someone one of the volunteer Orbis ophthalmologists will help you with the case.
What other work are you doing with Orbis? You said you're doing so much now that you're a paid consultant for them, right?
Yeah, so the flying eye hospital stuff and all that's volunteer, and the webinars and the online consult thing is all. That's all. The consulting stuff is because of my experience with medical education. So I work with Orbis and their partners on improving the teaching ability of the ophthalmologists in the program. So we have a couple things going on in China and in sub-Saharan Africa, trying to improve the residency training programs in those areas by using learning and utilizing modern educational techniques, and how to give a good lecture and teaching in the OR, ironically enough, and but just those sorts of things. So that stuff is consulting type stuff, and I'll go I'll go to a program in Uganda for a couple days, and then travel from there to Kenya or Rwanda, Ethiopia, whatever, and then work with the people there to try to improve their educational ability.
But you've done some of these similar things with IJCAHPO, right?
So
in terms of like helping standardize international residency curriculum.
ICO.
Through ICO. Okay.
So through the International Council of Ophthalmology, yeah. So I'm the director for education for the ICO. That we've been doing for quite some time. One of the arms of the ICO is educating the educators and improving educational ability. So yeah, I mean, we have an international ophthalmology curriculum. We've developed a lot of residency assessment tools. We have an accreditation document and are trying to become an international accrediting body. So I'm in charge of the accreditation part of that. And that's one of the groups that that's the group I travel the most with internationally. So outside of doing neuro-ophthalmology, I do the medical education stuff with the International Council, and we do a lot of trying to improve residency training, the same kind of thing Orbis is doing in a little different way. So we have the ICO's model is in general more of a couple of day meeting where we try to get residency program directors or the important educators from a region. So if it's a smaller country like Tunisia, we'll try to get all the program directors from Tunisia and the supporting faculty to one meeting for a couple of days. Versus with Orbis, it's more working with individual programs. And so that takes up a bunch of time working with the ICO, and we do at least 4 or 5 of those what we call residency program director meetings, 2-day meetings a year, which are really patterned after the meeting that myself and some friends of mine started back 17 years ago in the United States, the Educating the Educators meeting, which takes place the day before the AUPO meeting. So it's tied now to that meeting. But the first meeting of that kind, we started in Iowa, myself and good friend Dr. Andy Lee, and the second one was in Cincinnati. And then we convinced the AUPO that, hey, no one needs another meeting that you have to travel to. Why don't we tie the Educating the Educators meeting to the AUPO meeting, which is all about education chairmen, but program directors are also part of that. So that led to this ICO international kind of effort with the same kind of thing.
A lot of the stuff you've developed through the ICO, like the Oscars, the OSACs, all that's made it to the Academy website.
Mm-hmm.
What is the quality of international residency programs like relative to what you see here in the U.S.?
Well, certainly hugely variable. And I think one of the most important thing about the U.S. that differentiates the U.S. from certainly not all countries, UK, Australia, some of the other, and they have very good systems, is the standardization. So, I mean, you can take a resident from Cincinnati and pretty much they're probably going to get about the same kind of training that a resident from UCLA is going to get or from Baylor or whatever. Whereas in most countries, it can be hugely variable because there is no sort of standards of accreditation, which is why I'm so passionate about that as something that I think that's the single most important thing to improve residency training around the world is some sort of minimum standards. There are places you can say, I've got a training program and you've got a training program. No, you just start seeing if people will come to train there. There's no standards you have to adhere to. So I think that the uniformity, the standardization in the U.S., although people in the U.S. might say, oh, it's not that standard, but compared to the world, it's very standard. So that's one of the benefits, I think. I think that there's I don't know. I think there's a lot. It seems to me there's a better availability of ophthalmologists willing to teach in the U.S. And I think that's, I don't know. I think that's because in general ophthalmologists are pretty well remunerated. That's not so in a lot of places. And the reason I think being well remunerated helps is because you can take time and say, okay, I'm making enough money, I can do some teaching. Whereas in a lot of countries, you're teaching and you're not putting bread on the table for your family, and you don't get paid for teaching and all that stuff. So that's the biggest problem. Is it's teaching doesn't make money, and how do you reward the teachers in other countries who are taking time where they could be in the OR, or they could be doing 3 times as many cases in the OR if they didn't have a student. And so those are the problems. So I think the nice thing that the U.S. has is that ophthalmologists make a lot of money compared to their counterparts in most parts of the world, and that allows the teaching to be easier. I think if it were different here, we'd probably have the same problem with the teachers. So I think that's one of the issues.
So it sounds like the work you're doing with the ICO and with Orbis is kind of fairly similar.
Sure, it's most of the stuff. Now that said, since I'm a neuro-ophthalmologist, usually whenever I go with Orbis, oh, you can do neuro too, or we'll go do something with the ICO and oh, you can do some neuro-ophthalmology lectures too. So it's sort of they get 2 things for one, so to speak. But yeah, I'd say probably 2/3 of the traveling is probably medical education, and 1/3 is neuro-ophthalmology, just being invited to do neuro-op at other places, and then there's no medical education portion of it at all.
So how is your work different, the work you do with the International Joint Commission on Allied Health Personnel and Ophthalmology?
Yeah, so,
I had to rehearse that.
Yeah, IJCAHPO. So I've been working with JCAHPO for a long time. JCAHPO is a group that was a joint commission on allied health personnel. So it's started in North America, U.S. and Canada, and AAO is one of the founding members. So the members of JCAHPO are organizations. So the North American Ophthalmology Society is a member. The American Academy is a member. AUPO is a member, and so on. So there's 20 members. And the mission of IJCAHPO is to educate, train, certify, and accredit ophthalmic technicians, and to create a career for ophthalmic technicians, basically. So IJCAHPO has an arm that's education, and they have an arm that's certification, and really an arm that's accreditation. And the people who work in those arms usually don't mingle with one another. It's not good to be. So I've been the head of the education part of IJCAHPO. I've been the president of JCAHPO, and I'm now the secretary for international relations for JCAHPO. So the work I do with them is all about technicians, so ophthalmic assistants, technicians. The WHO term is Allied Ophthalmic Personnel, or AOP. So if we were going to rename JCAHPO, it would be Allied Ophthalmic Personnel. That's the term that WHO wants to use. And some years ago now, JCAHPO became IJCAHPO because we have international certificates. So technicians who've taken the tests and passed the standardized tests internationally, and we're trying to grow that throughout the world because in some countries, there's no job description for allied ophthalmic personnel.
Right.
So, and in fact, my consulting with the WHO all came through allied ophthalmic personnel and human resources, because they realized it's not enough to have ophthalmologists in these countries. I mean, the ophthalmologists are checking visions and things that you don't need to be an ophthalmologist to do. Why are they checking visions? Because there's no allied ophthalmic personnel. So I think in general, people have pretty much realized around the world, you got to have the team to really be efficient. And so that's sort of what I'm trying to accomplish is we're working on a white paper to use with ministers of health to show how important allied ophthalmic personnel are and how cheap they are relative to doctors in terms of what you pay them and how much training they need. But in order to have a team and to be efficient, your doctors need them. So that's part of part of the WHO stuff. I've been a consultant there a couple of times. And I'm also on the Human Resources Committee for the IAPB, the International Association to Prevent Blindness. And we're working on a team training curriculum right now for that, to try to reach that goal.
Who was it that, what organization did you just give that COVID-19 webinar through? Was that through IJCAHPO?
I did. So I did one for IJCAHPO and then one for Orbis. Almost the same, a little different. The audiences are a little different. And then I just, this past week, did a follow-up COVID one for IJCAHPO.
So many hats. You wear so many hats. I'm not surprised you say, staying organized, being regimented. One of the first things I noticed working with you as a third-year med student, and I don't think this has changed in the past, 4 or 5 years since we've known each other, your screensaver to your laptop says, "Get back to work." That's like a command.
I think I changed it, but
what are the origins of that?
Just, a reminder that there's always something I could be doing. There's never like, I don't get bored, there's never like nothing to do. There's always something on my list of things that needs to be worked on. Sometimes there's a little, maybe too many things, but the other thing too, I think about having these hats is, at least in some of the roles, the ability to delegate. So I'm definitely a big believer in finding good people to work with and working with them. But then as long as they can do it, let them do it. And I'm happy to oversee and, say, yes, that's good, which is what they need sometimes. But I'm a big believer in delegating appropriately to get things done.
Something I really admire about you that I've noticed that you alone seem to do throughout medical school, intern year, the practices I've visited, I've never seen anyone run a clinic as efficiently as you. And I'm talking pre-COVID. You are so diligent, and you are so mindful of, and stress this to your staff about the importance of staying on time, not having the patients wait.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like every time I go into a room with you with a patient, it's like you're sitting in front of the patient, you give them your full attention. I feel like we've been in there for 20 minutes because you succinctly answer and address everything they want, and we leave and it's been like 5 to 10.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, I think part of it, what drives that is I don't like to wait. It's my pet peeve. I don't like people being late, and I don't like being late to see my patients, and I don't want them to think that I'm running late. So part of it's that. That's just one of intrinsic somehow. I don't know why. My parents, I'm not sure where that comes from, but I don't like being late personally. And I don't like to be, it makes me feel anxious if I'm late. And so I like things to run on time. Now, as a neuro-ophthalmologist, I don't see as many patients as other docs might see. But I think even if I weren't a neuro-ophthalmologist, I would still have the same issues and want to run on time. So I think it's part of it's being organized and a lot of the neuro-op things. I've been doing it for a while. So I know probably what they're going to ask. So I try to answer the questions before they ask them and then say, any questions? And most of the time I say, I don't think so. You covered everything. So I try to answer and anticipate those questions. And sometimes I hurry my technicians along a little bit, and they know. I said, this is what I need to know from you. Don't write too much. Don't get into that. I'm going to have to get into that. But I don't know. It's important for me, though, to be on time with the patients, and they don't. It'd be very unusual that they'd have to wait past their sort of assigned, appointment time.
As a neuro-ophthalmologist, neuro-ophthalmology is a little different than most other areas of ophthalmology in that usually neuro-ophthalmologists who aren't dual trained in pediatric ophthalmology or oculoplastic and reconstructive surgery or aren't practicing comprehensive ophthalmology, they usually don't operate at all. How did you decide to go into neuro-ophthalmology, choose that as a subspecialty, and do you miss the OR at all?
Yeah. So I think when I got to residency, I thought I was going to be a retina specialist. There was no question in my mind. As a med student, I had done basic science research in retina. I went to my residency at the University of Virginia in part because in my lab doing retina, the same type of research I was doing at Hopkins, Peter Campachero was there as a fellow, and I was a med student. And then he went and took his first job at the University of Virginia. So when I was looking at programs, I either wanted to stay at Hopkins or to continue doing that research or go I thought, to the University of Virginia, because that's where Peter was going. And so I ended up in Virginia. And within about a year or so, I realized, I don't know. It's kind of, clinical retina, you kind of see it, you either recognize it or you don't. And towards my, the latter part of my med school, I also did a month of neuro-ophthalmology with Dr. Neil Miller, and that was just fascinating, very detective-like. I thought, geez, you could go in the room and walk out with pretty little, equipment and say, I know exactly what's going on and where it's going on in the brain. And we'll get the MRI to verify it, but I know that. So I really liked that about it, and it was very intellectually stimulating. And so somewhere early in my residency, I realized, I think I really like neuro-ophthalmology. And so I had a mentor as a med student, as a resident, Dr. Steve Newman. And then I ended up going back to do a fellowship with Dr. Neil Miller. And I wouldn't do it any differently. So, and I did, I do straight neuro-ophthalmology. I was the first neuro-ophthalmologist at the Storm Eye Center in Charleston. So I never had a neuro-ophthalmologist. So I was kind of like, okay, what do you do? Well, I do temporal biopsies. I do optic nerve sheath fenestrations. That's about it. And so for 3 years when I was there, that's what I did. And then when I moved to Cincinnati, the oculoplastics guys who'd written papers on how to do nerve sheath fenestration said, well, you can still do them if you want, but there's not that many. You're probably not going to get block time. We're happy to be your technician. Just tell us what to do. We'll send you all the patients. And I said, yeah. So I did them a little bit and then realized, there weren't that many. And so I said, all right, I'm not going to do nerve sheath fenestrations. And so then I was just doing temporal biopsies and I didn't have any block time. And after another 3 or 4 years, I said, all right, forget it. Just you guys do the biopsies. And that was probably around 98, so it was 7, 8 years after I finished training. But yeah, I never, even as a resident, I wasn't like my co-residents lived and died to be in the OR. And I was like, that's okay. But I wasn't, it wasn't really, it definitely obviously wasn't for me. It wasn't something I needed. And so when all was said and done, I was like, oh, good. I don't have to worry about trying to find time to book the case and so on. And I was only doing temporal biopsies when I stopped anyway. So yeah, I love what I do. I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't go back and change it.
You said that kind of shifted a little bit when you came to Cincinnati. What was it that brought you here?
Well, that's a long story, but so I pretty much what happened was I met my to-be wife when we were fellows at Hopkins, and she was doing pediatric ophthalmology, and so we dated, and I had a job in South Carolina, and she had a job in Maine as a private practice. There's no academics, and I wanted to be an academic neuro-ophthalmologist. So I moved to South Carolina. She moved to Maine, and we continued to date, and then got more serious and said, all right, we both like where we are, but if we're going to get married, one of us has to move. And I can't go to Maine and be an academic neuro-ophthalmologist, and you can go to Charleston and be a private practice pediatric. So she said, okay, under the circumstances that if she doesn't like it, we'll move. So she came down, and after a year and a half, let's just say she didn't like the prevailing social attitudes, and she said, okay, I want to move. And so we looked around, and around that time, well, it wasn't quite that time. It was before we decided to move. Bob Osher, who was the head of the Eye Institute at the time, at the Cincinnati Eye Institute at the time, called me and left a message. And my secretary said, "Oh yeah, Dr. Osher called you from Cincinnati." And I said, "Who the heck is that?" Oh, he didn't say. He just called and asked you to give him a call back. And I said, "Okay." So I called. He said, "This is Dr. Bob Osher." I said, "Yeah." He said, "We need a neuro-ophthalmologist in Cincinnati." And I said, "Okay, that's nice. Why are you calling me?" "Well, my good friend, Jeff Odell, we were roommates, and he said you're an up-and-coming neuro-ophthalmologist. How about coming to Cincinnati?" I said, "Forget it." I said, "I'm sitting on the porch of my new house. I can see the ocean. This is where I've always wanted to live." I said, "But my wife's not that happy, and we're giving it another 6 months. But she's a pediatric, we need a pediatric ophthalmologist." And I said, "Well, give me 6 months." He said, "Okay." So 6 months went by, and we said, "All right, so we started looking around. And we quickly realized that although there were some number of jobs for neuro-ophthalmologists and pediatric ophthalmologists around the United States, there were almost none that wanted both. And not only that, they wouldn't interview one of us if they knew we were bringing the other. because that would be competition for their group, So we went to Cincinnati and stayed at Dr. Osher's house for the weekend. And it was kind of like the Firm, that movie, The Firm. Every mealtime, a bigger, fancier car showed up to pick us up to go out to the meal. And, Dr. Osher's has a very interesting home with a regulation basketball court and baseball field and all sorts of sporting equipment. Very nice place. And so we went to one meal after another meal and fancier cars. And at the end, we're like, oh, there's got to be something wrong with this place. This is like too good to be true. And so we came for the weekend, and then we looked around a little more and decided, let's move to Cincinnati. Maybe 3 years we'll be there because we don't have any ties to Cincinnati. There's no reason for us geographically to live in Cincinnati. I told him when he called, he said, all I know about Cincinnati is it's out west somewhere. And he said, we're not that far west. I said, you're not on the East Coast, you're west. But as things happen, after 3 years, we were like, well, it's a pretty good deal. I always wanted to be a residency program director, even though I was now in private practice. And it looked like maybe I was going to get that opportunity. And, we got here I got here in July 94. So that was 26 years ago. And by 98, I was the residency program director.
So for 20, 30 years, you were the guy. You were the neuro-ophthalmologist in our tri-state.
Right. Yeah, there were no other neuro-ophthalmologists really. Or for most of that time in Kentucky.
Right.
The whole state.
Are you still going there?
Louisville. So I do. I'm a professor at University of Louisville. I go down once a month, lecture to the residents, and then see patients with the residents all day, and then drive home.
I don't know how you do that. A lot of people have likened neuro-ophthalmology to, like you mentioned, like detective work. You're kind of like the house of ophthalmology. No other subspecialty can figure out what's going on. They send it to you.
That's true.
And I know you're a huge fan of monocular diplopia consults.
Yeah.
What are some things you wish that the referring providers would often do, or information they would acquire to send to you before they send someone your way?
Well, I don't know. I think I always tell the residents, that there's really nothing special about neuro-ophthalmology. It's that you take a history, which, most residents, I think, say, what's wrong? My vision's blurry. Okay, let's look at your eyes. So the history part is the detective part, in part. I mean, that's part of it. But it's taking a good history. And I think our secret weapons can be color vision for people with bad vision. The color vision's pretty good. It's probably not the nerve problem. But they're little things. I mean, they're and I have a whole talk on, call it House Without the Attitude, detecting difficult diagnoses of unexplained vision loss, basically where the patient has a normal exam, but they can't see for some reason. So there's all sorts of little tricks and things that are not sophisticated, I would say. They're either simple little things, like a pinhole for monocular double vision, for instance. So I don't know. I think that the referrals, of course, come from a wide variety of docs. I mean, mostly optometrists, ophthalmologists, neurologists, and neurosurgeons, some family docs, and so on. And so what you expect, of course, is different depending. And I do review all my referrals in advance. And sometimes I will say, get a regular eye, someone's referred by a family doc because they have heard my name. And I say, get this is probably glasses or something, get a regular eye exam. And if there's still a problem, let me know. I don't know if there's specific things that, I tell my assistants and my patients, I don't do headaches and I don't do dizzy. I definitely don't do monocular double vision. So there are a few things that are, Dr. Golnik doesn't take care of those things. And there's plenty of patients with, real neuro-ophthalmology difficult problems that need to be seen because there's still, not really, there's certainly no one else in town that's doing full-time neuro-ophthalmology. One of our partners and former residents, Dr. Hansen, Laura Hansen, is doing a little bit of neuro, but she's doing mostly comprehensive. So she sees some of the neuro stuff, which is nice.
We get a lot at the resident clinic. I mean, we don't have neuro-ophthalmology clinic that often there, just due to time constraints and scheduling. But we get a lot of referrals from other providers or neurology, neurosurgery specifically. Needs to be seen by Dr. Golnik to rule out papilledema.
Right.
And we said if we put every one of those in neuro clinic,
right.
you would never
Oh,
leave.
well, that's certainly, if you want to talk about banes of my existence, that's one of them. Because, a few years ago, somebody put an article in the radiology literature and said, oh, these are the findings you're going to see more often in increased intracranial pressure, idiopathic intracranial hypertension, fluid around the optic nerve sheath, partially empty cella. But those are normal findings. The problem is anybody these days gets an MRI and the radiologist looks at the scan and says, oh, there's a partially empty cella. This can be seen with increased intracranial pressure, correlate clinically. Oh, what does that mean? Rule out papilledema. What happens then? They say, oh, papilledema, that's neuro-ophthalmology. And then they try to get on my schedule. I refuse to see those patients. I said, listen, see any eye doctor to rule out the papilledema. I've never seen someone who went in for just a routine MRI for some totally unrelated reason, who had those incidental findings, who had papilledema. So I refuse to see those patients. It's just not a good use of, a solo neuro-ophthalmologist in Cincinnati's time,
right?
Kind of a thing.
Yeah, we put them all in our general clinic and we say, okay, if we see papilledema,
right, or if there's a question,
right.
Then fine. If there's a question, I'm not sure. And if there is papilledema, I don't need to see them. Then yes, they have papilledema, let's take care of it.
It's amazing that there was probably only like 1 or 2 or 3 people who wrote that paper, put it into the literature, and now it's so widespread and it's affected ophthalmology across the board.
Right, and the problem is that the patients also, they read the reports or they are told, oh, you've got fluid around your optic nerve, you're going to go blind, or something like that. And so they're all anxious and nervous about it, and hard to understand. Well, wait a minute, they said on the scan I had this abnormality, and so I have to explain to them, well, it can be abnormal, but it can be normal, but they have to rule out this thing with your eyes to make sure that it's just a normal finding in your case. And sometimes it's hard for patients to understand that, and it depends a little bit on how that's presented to the patient by the referring doctor too.
Right. So let's rewind a bit. You said you'd always kind of had an inkling that you wanted to become a program director, or where did that come from?
Yeah, so I thought, all through the first part of my college that I was going to be a teacher, like a PhD. I was a chemistry major, and I thought I'd be a teacher. I always wanted to be a teacher, and somewhere along the line, I realized I could be a doctor and a teacher, both, and have really smart students, theoretically, and really small classes. And I thought, that sounds like a good idea. There are no doctors in my family. And so I decided to go to medical school. And then I realized, oh, well, to really be a teacher, or not to really be a teacher, to organize the teaching and so on, a program director. So I, somewhere during residency, I thought, well, I'd really, one of my goals would be to become a program director. And in my first job, there was already a program director there, but I thought, well, I'll bide my time. But then we ended up moving to Cincinnati, and I went into private practice temporarily and thought, oh, this is not where I thought the career is going to go. But everyone said, well, if you do this and if that and this and that, maybe eventually you'll be a program director. So that's how it ended up happening, pretty much.
Who was the program director before you, Harry?
Josh Sands.
Oh, okay.
Was the program. And Dwight Cullen was the program director before that.
I heard.
So, yeah.
So as program director, you select which applicants get invited for an interview.
Yeah, so that's certainly one of the many things is that at least in our program, it's not the same in every program, but in our program, traditionally the program director would review all the applications and then pick the interviewees. And then, of course, the committee would then pick or create the rank list for but the program director would siphon off and sort out who to interview.
Everyone always wonders, are there secret cutoffs in terms of step 1 or GPA? What are some of the qualities when you were program director you looked for?
We didn't really, we didn't really have any strict criteria. Obviously, it's the whole package, so you might have someone whose board scores weren't that great, but their grades were really good and they'd done a lot of research, or their grades weren't as good, but their board scores were really good. So if your board scores weren't great and your grades weren't great, not a good sign. But I think, and then certainly the letters too, I think, and personal people telling you these are great people, that kind of thing. All of those things came into play. And, it used to be a lot easier. I think the year 1 or 2 years before I became program director, we had, I think, like 120 applicants for 3 spots. And that was the lowest in the history of this program. And now we have 550 for 4 spots. So the job's a lot worse now. And when I was program director, it started gradually going up until after 15 years of it, we were up in the low 400s, and it's continued to rise since then. But now, of course, there's a lot more applications. And I think, and it's also, I mean, now, of course, what do you do when you look at these applications? You go online, and there's the files. Oh, they're all the files. It's all organized. It's so nice. Back then, it was all paper. I mean, we would get like boxes of applications. No, there was no spreadsheet with, board scores all in a row or that kind of thing. So you had to look at everything pretty much. And boy, did it take time. Now it's definitely easier. You can sort by columns on the Excel database of board scores and look at your top 100 board scores if you want. Frankly, I don't know. I know that I don't think any of these really changed a lot in terms of the criteria. It's gotten, I think, the scores all seem higher and everybody seems better than they used to be. I hate to have to apply to ophthalmology myself now. Yeah, I think it's a combination. I don't think it's really any one thing. There is some pressure because, you get, certainly programs are evaluated by their pass rate on the boards. So that's a program evaluation thing. What % of your residents pass the boards their first time? Well, people who are good test takers tend to pass their boards their first time, and people who are good test takers tend to do good on the boards. So taking someone who doesn't do well on the boards, you're like, are we taking someone who's going to hurt our metrics of how good our program, you know what I mean? So there's just definitely some part of that. Now, of course, now we're not going to have any Part 1 board scores.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
I don't know. I'll tell you one thing that probably you don't know, or maybe no one knows. I never took the national boards personally, because back then, I don't know about now, there was something called Flex, and that was an alternate to the national boards, and it was pass-fail. And Hopkins said to all of their students, take Flex. We don't want you compared to anybody else. You're from Hopkins. You don't need it. That's what they said.
My sister goes to Hopkins right now. I'm pretty sure there's still a similar sort of sentiment.
Probably. And so they said, take Flex. It's pass-fail. So I took Flex. So I never took the national board. So when you were telling me about studying and all that earlier, I was like, we never had anything like that. My feeling is, it's going to make it harder to sort out the interviewees, for sure, I think. I mean, we'll have all the other metrics, the grades and everything. I'm not a huge believer in standardized testing scores to begin with. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, I think we know there's a time when we won't have them, and we can always go back and compare, our passing rates on the boards to afterwards. We actually tried, one year we tried to the committee to hide all the scores. Because, as I tell them, pretty much, we don't usually have problems with residents because they're stupid. We have problems for other reasons, professionalism, communication skills, those sorts of things. And the interviews really, shouldn't be about how smart you are. And so we tried to sort of put the scores to a side, but with a rating scale that would then be averaged into because we don't want, the trend would be the interviewer sees, oh my gosh, 270 board, this person's going to be really good. And then oh yeah, they were really good. So you have this bias going into the interview. The point was to mask the interviewers. So you didn't know if this person had a 235 board score or a 265 board score, because that might affect your rating of the interview. But it was very difficult to do that. And letters would say things about board scores and AOA, and it was almost impossible to really mask it. And so we don't do that anymore.
I wonder if what's going to eventually happen is that step 2 is going to become step 1.
Well, right. So the question is, if you're going to want numbers, well, there's another number, and we'll see. I don't know if that's, when is that? Is that this coming group of applicants or next year's group of applicants?
I think by 2022 is when the change will go into effect, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't know. It'll make the residency program director's job harder, I think, or they'll be more nervous about, picking the people.
Well, you've probably read through thousands, if not tens of thousands of personal statements.
Oh, yeah.
During your 15 years as program director. What were the qualities that make a good personal statement? And in general, do you think it was better to be neutral and forgettable, or like take the risk of being memorable?
Well, so I like the memorable ones. I mean, and that's probably, that's my personal. I think I don't remember many of them. I can remember one of them, and it started with, I rushed down the stairs and found my grandfather unconscious on the floor. And that was the beginning, and that's the only one I probably remember. And it was all about how the medical, they had to resuscitate the grandfather and the medical care involved. And it was very memorable, obviously, because that was at least 15 years ago, at least probably 20 years ago. So when med students ask me or show me their personal statement, everybody says, well, I want to be an ophthalmologist. I'm good with my hands. I've worn glasses my whole life, and that's made me interested in ophthalmology. So I think the question is where you draw the line. You don't want to be too crazy, probably. But I think I'd much rather read a memorable one than the usual, 2-3 paragraph, same old thing kind of a thing. So for me.
What's your advice to medical students interested in ophthalmology or getting involved or working with the department?
Yeah, well, I think the earlier you're sure about ophthalmology, the better. One of my friends at med school knew from, I think he was like second grade, he wanted to be an ophthalmologist. And so he had a great application and he matched a great program. But I think the earlier the better, because then you could get involved with ophthalmology, really be sure. I came into med school after having a roommate that was blind. So I knew I was kind of at least interested, but my girlfriend's father in college was an ophthalmologist. And that also made me a little interested, but I still didn't come in thinking, oh, it's going to be ophthalmology. In fact, I was at the gym, at the med school gym lifting, and I worked on bench presses with a guy, and when we spotted each other and started talking, turned out it was Bert Glazier, famous retina specialist, and had a basic science lab at Hopkins. And I said, this was my first year of med school, and I said, well, I actually entered as an MD PhD. That's another story. And he said, oh, well, my lab's open this summer. And I said, oh, well, I'm looking for something this summer. And he said, well, work with me. And I said, okay. So I started working in his lab at Wilmer, and worked there for like 2 years, summers, but also during the med school years, and scrubbed in cases with him and so, et cetera. And so, as he said, about cataract surgeons, he said, the problem with cataract surgery is that if you have to make a decision, it's because you made a mistake. So I said, okay. So I pretty much was sure I wasn't going to be a cataract surgeon, but of course he was a retina specialist. So anyway, so that's how I got interested and got interested early on. Most people won't have those experiences probably. So
go to the gym.
Yeah, go to the gym. The moral of the story, go to the gym, the med school gym. So I think the earlier you can be interested, obviously, the earlier, the more experience you can get that helps you decide for sure you do want to do ophthalmology. But if you're doing ophthalmology, then it's easier to get letters from ophthalmologists and so on. So I think that's nice. Now, that said, clearly you don't have to know from second grade that you're going in ophthalmology, but then you better do well in med school because it's competitive. There's no question that ophthalmology residency is competitive. So you want to do good in your classes. You want to get good letters, and you want to pass part 1 of the boards and do well on part 2 of the boards in the future.
You've worked so much, trying to improve a standardized curriculum for ophthalmology internationally, and you've done this teach the teachers thing for so long now. But you can have the best curriculum in place, you can have all the resources in the world, but it's really incumbent upon, or it's really up to the resident to figure out how to utilize that and how to succeed with that. What do you think are some good qualities that make up a good resident?
I think that's true. Obviously, the resident's got to be motivated, but I think, there's certainly, I don't think it's all on the resident either. I think you got to have a good system. You hopefully have good teachers. You have faculty that are really interested in teaching, want the residents to succeed. You have hopefully the resources that you need for that. I was just informed that our IC is like at its life expectancy or something, and that we have to get a new one, which I'm not sure how we would do that. But anyway, you want to have the right resources. But I think, when we want, we think of the residents as junior colleagues. I want to walk into that room with a patient who the resident just saw, and that patient say, wow, that was a great young doctor. And that happens all the time. I want them to be able to communicate well. I want them to be professional and ethical. I want them to really have that, thirst and hunger for knowledge, that they want to know what I know about neuro-ophthalmology, or when they're doing cornea, and I think that's what all the faculty want. One of the things that we get a lot of complaints of from, I won't say which faculty, are that, well, they don't really like this part of ophthalmology. They're not interested, and I tell the resident, I don't care if you're interested. I don't care if you're interested or not. Pretend you're interested. You're going to get a better evaluation. Just pretend you're interested, and maybe you'll learn more. So I think that's what the doctors, the teachers want. The teachers want their residents to succeed. I hope the teachers want their residents to be better than we were, or we are, in the future. And that's, I think, where the real pride in teaching residents is seeing them go out and succeed and do well and be productive and so on. So I think it's the motivation. And, I think it's most residents, at least, that I've had experience with in our program, they're generally usually pretty motivated, I think. So I think that's what I would say. I don't know that there's any. You got to be smart, obviously, but everything we look at on the applications are about how smart you are. So if we can't pick you by that criteria, then we're in trouble.
Well, these are some real words of wisdom, because as program director, you were one of the first nationally to be awarded the Straatsma Award from the Academy, right?
Right, yeah. The Straatsma Award is a award that was back in the day when I became a program director. There was very little program director sort of education or camaraderie and so on. And although we could go to the AUPO meeting, there was like 1 hour in the 2.5 days dedicated to program directors. And so some of the program directors got together and said, we really need to be more organized. And they were like, they didn't like the idea. Oh, you're trying to take over from the chairman. And then finally they said, okay, we're going to have a program directors council. And you 8 people are the first 8. So I was one of those 8 and became president of the program directors council, which was a kind of a succession of things. So, and that program directors council, of course, is still in place. And that was around a few years into that was around the time when we started that Educating the Educators meeting. And then somewhere in there, they decided, they realized, and we actually did a survey, the average tenure of an ophthalmology program director was like 2.1 years. That was the average length. And you can't begin to learn how to do it in 2.1 years. And they looked at that, the leadership, to the credit, said, that's bad. If that's really our primary person in charge of education, it's 2 years. Because what happened was it's the youngest person who's the least busy. Oh, you be program director. And so they said, well, we need to get more resources for program directors council. And then they came up with the Straatsma Award for the best, the best program director in the United States. And I would say the first 4 winners of that were neuro-ophthalmologists, all good friends of mine. And me as one of the 4. And so that award now has been around for a long time. I think it's like 15 or 16 years.
But you also got the ACGME's Parker Palmer Courage to Teach Award, which is recognizing a program director, not just in ophthalmology, but every medical and surgical specialty across the board.
Right. That was very nice. So that's for the national program director. And they give about like 4 or 5 of those a year in different, you have to apply, and your dean has to, the DIO, the director, the designated institutional official, the head of GME has to, nominate you and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was very nice.
Being so involved with education, what are your thoughts on ophthalmology still having the oral boards? We're one of the few specialties left that still does them.
Yeah, I think.
Do you think there's still value there?
I think there's value there. I think it does distinguish things. Of course, the American Board of Ophthalmology was the first subspecialty board in the United States. I think that there is value there. They certainly, and I've examined for the oral boards a number of times. They have a good system. I mean, the main issue typically with oral boards would be the subjectivity of grading them. But they have a system in place that really eliminates basically as much of the subjectivity as you can eliminate to make it more objective. So I don't know. I think it's value. I don't know if that's just because I had to do it, so everyone else should have to do it. But yeah, it's a good exam. It's a great paradigm for the ABO because the examiners are not paid to examine. Their travel is not paid to get there. Their hotel room is not paid for unless they examine in their hotel room. And yet you've got all these ophthalmologists who come for free, not just for free, but are spending money on their plane tickets and everything else. And that's how they get it done as inexpensively. It's still expensive for a resident, but that's why it doesn't cost a lot more money. So it's a great paradigm if you can convince the ophthalmologist to do it.
I didn't realize it was optional. I thought it had to be in their hotel room.
No, you can have your own hotel room and then just examine in a different hotel room. I mean, and I think all that might be changing though. I heard that they've got some new center or something. I don't know. I shouldn't say anything, but I think it's a little weird. The beds in the room there and the table and the chairs. I was kind of surprised when I went there. I didn't know that's the way it was going to be when I was...
Explain this to people listening because this is very unique. When you take the oral boards, you walk in, you're in a hotel as the examinee. You walk into the examiner's personal hotel room.
Or it may or may not be, but you have to make it up. I mean, it has to look like it's not a used hotel room. So you're told, the examiners are told, you have to get up early, you have to make your bed, you have to, nothing personal effects around, you got to make it look like a room that's not lived in. But yeah, I mean, there's a chair outside each room, the long hallway. You go, the applicant goes to their appointed room number, and that's going to be a block of 6 rooms. And it's, room 343, and there's a chair. You sit in the chair, and then the senior examiner comes out and gets the group of the 6 people, because it's 6 people per team per half day, and explains what's going to go on. And then we literally synchronize our watches, and at 8:30 a.m., all the doors of those open. Dr. Hura, and hopefully you'll say yes. And you come in, and then you have to, sign something and so on. And I remember when I took it, the examiner opened the door and said, "Dr. Smith?" I'm like, "No." And he closed the door. And I'm like, that was weird. And he opened the door again, and he looked at me and he said, "Dr. Smith?" I said, "Nope." And he was clearly, probably his first time examining me. And Dr. Smith was the name of the senior examiner that runs from room to room. So he said, he opened the door the third time, "Dr. Golnik?" And I said, "Yes." And I went in. But he was more nervous than I was. So.
That's funny. So, I mean, you've done so much in your career. What's next? What's on the horizon for you? Or what are you currently working on project-wise?
Well, I think that... I've been chair now here at University of Cincinnati for 5 years and had my 5-year review. And so in general, they do a 5-year kind of a thing. So I'm looking to renew that for 5 years. I've been informally told that was going to happen, but I've not had a formal discussion yet, in part because of the COVID thing, but they're running out of time. So that will be 5 more years of chairmanship, but there won't be more than 5 more years of chairmanship. 5 more years of that.
Why do you say that?
I think that will be 10 years, and 10 years, in my opinion, is long enough. I like a lot of being chairman, but not all of it. And I think after 10 years, I think I learned a lesson when I was program director. Did it for 15 years, and when I became interim chair, I thought, well, I still want to be program director. And they said, no, you can't. Our policy is we can't have a person be in both of those roles because the residents if they have a problem with the program director, they're supposed to go to the chair. And if you're the same person, and we had that happen once in the past, it did not work well. So they said no. And I was like, all right. And I was upset that I couldn't be program director. But within 6 months, I realized, I'm so glad I'm not program director because I mean, I know it or not, I think I was a little burnt out. In the new program director came in, Dr. Kaufman, all sorts of great ideas and just energy. And I realized that was a really good thing that I'm not still program director. And I think the same thing happens with chairs. In 5 years, I'll be 65. And I'm not looking to retire, but I think there are other things I want to do with international ophthalmology, which is, one of my main interests. So there's other roles in the ICO. There's roles in IJCAHPO that I would consider. And I'd certainly like to continue, and even Orbis, I'd like to continue the international ophthalmology until I can't. But I can see perhaps not doing patient care anymore in 5 years as well. So I think that for the next 5 years, it'll be, I think, chairmanship and then continuing the work. My main goal really is to have an international accreditation system, as I talked about earlier, for residency training programs. We already have people who want us to also do it for fellowship training programs, but we've just had a trial pilot program with 3 residency training programs internationally that's finished. And we're trying to now basically open the door up for any program in the world to say, I want ICO accreditation. But we're not able to do that yet. I thought we would a year ago, and it's taken some time. So I'm still working on that. That's certainly something I want to see happen and want to run for some time, for some number of years until it gets up and really running well. And then, I don't know, next thing.
Yeah. Well, I have to really commend your international efforts for education. I think when you improve education, you improve the quality of clinical care that's being provided.
Mm-hmm.
So I view it in some sense, as some really remarkable humanitarian efforts, both internationally and abroad. And I thank you very much. The shining example of what the Academy's mission is, which is protecting sight and empowering lives. It's been phenomenal working with you as a medical student and now as a resident as well. So
same here. You've been a great resident.
I appreciate that. I know we're on camera. You don't have to say that. But all right. Well, Dr. Golnik, this was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Really.
You're welcome.